Hello ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in the Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's instalment, I'll be concluding my review of the Messerschmitt 109 Gustav 6. To give you a small historical overview on the Bayerische Flugzeugwerke 900 Gustav series of fighter aircraft, and indeed this iteration, the Messerschmitt 109 Gustav series of fighter aircraft can trace their history back to late 1941. Whereby they were to replace the already in service Messerschmitt 109 F4 variant, with the emphasis going from maneuverability to speed and climb rate, and this was reflected immediately in the change of engine, going from a Daimler-Benz 601E engine to a Daimler-Benz 605A engine. Moreover, a number of improvements were added immediately, including more armour for the fuel tank, strengthened glass, especially in terms of its bulletproof capabilities, and a strengthened wing structure in the new Gustavs. Seeing introduction to service in terms of the Gustav 1 and Gustav 2 by the spring of 1942, a number of Luftwaffe pilots found the Gustav to be a completely different plane, due to its lack of manoeuvrability essentially, whereby their ability to go toe-to-toe with Spitfires in terms of turn circles on a more sort of turn-based fighting basis was no longer possible in the Gustav, with the emphasis on speed and climb rate meaning they had to resort to energy tactics in order to become supreme against their foe. This was noted more and more when the Gustav pilots started to go up against Spitfire Mark 9s and indeed P-51D Mustangs later on in the Western Front. The variant we look at here, the Gustav 6, was developed from late 1942 and saw introduction to service by the start of 1943. It was the first of the Gustav variants to be armed with twin 13mm machine guns above the prop, as indicated by the bulges above the canopy, also given the nickname of Debula, the bulges. And additionally, it was the first variant to mount a 30mm Mk108 cannon firing through the propeller hub, a cannon derived and devised by Reichmar Vorzig. Now what's important to note about the Gustav 6 is that this variant was the first standard model variant of the Gustav. When I say standard model, I mean that it was the first variant to undergo the fitting of Rüsetzen, i.e. field kits, including but not limited to the rockets under the wings, a pair of 30mm cannon pods under the wings, and 20mm cannon pods under the wings. Indeed, the Gustav 6 was one of the most produced variants of the Messerschmitt 109 Gustav series fighter aircraft, and could even be reflected as the most produced Messerschmitt 109 of all time. So, with that being said, and making the use of our methanol water 50 injection in our engine, as the plane historically had, how does the Gustav 6 perform in War Thunder exactly? Well, we're about to go up against the foe which I reckon is the most prominent foe the Gustav 6 will ever have to face with the rear-range battle ratings, and that being the Tempest. The Hawker Tempest is a plane that is your equal if not your superior. Our first pass in this vertical scissors, as I would call it, sees us glance a hit on them with our 13mm. Our second pass does nothing, and as we come on to our third pass, we conclude, with one of our 30mm shells hitting their right wing, taking them out of the game. Straight away we note that the Tempest is a plane that matches us or outperforms us in all regards. In speed, climb rate and acceleration, it should be our equal or superior. In terms of armament, it's our equal, I would say. And moreover, in terms of turn circle, it is definitely our superior. How did we win that dogfight then? Well, we made the most of probably the biggest hindrance, or assistance I should say, that the G-6 has, and was noted to have in reality. There is a large amount of weight shifted towards the nose of the plane, due to the new engine and indeed the new armament. Speaking of going nose first, we go nose first on that Illusion 4, not killing them perfectly, but taking out their tail control using our 30mm. And as you're going to see for the next couple of minutes of this game, they just drift at 3,000 metres, trying to regain control before bailing out, achieving our second kill. Going back to the nose heaviness, if you try turning on the level in a Messerschmitt 109 Gustav 6 at speeds below 300 km an hour, you're going to notice almost immediately that the plane will want to drop the nose. As a result, I advise against trying to turn fight below speeds of 400 km an hour to begin with, just because this is a plane which requires so much speed in order to be competitive in the turning theatre, even though its turn circle is probably one of the poorest for its rank. As we descend on this Spitfire Mark 16 from behind, Mark 18, we run out of cannon ammunition, and it's at this point I demonstrate exactly how effective the 13mm are at ripping a Spitfire to pieces. Setting them on fire from behind, we make the most of bleeding all our speed just to stick behind the Spitfire Mark 18 and finish them off accordingly with a brief reload of our 30mm cannon. Machine guns exhausted, we bring in the cannon, achieving kill number 3. So, going back to the nose heaviness and indeed the manoeuvrability of the plane, I've noticed that there is a niche of manoeuvrability for the G6 found at about the 350 to 500 km an hour mark, with really that 500 km an hour limit being an excess of 450 km an hour for roll rate, lockup or anything along those lines. The plane does not have the best turn circles, I've said, and really you don't want to be turn fighting against any opponents other than say your equal, another G6, or indeed perhaps a Focke-Wulf 190 A8. The reason being that turn fighting in most cases will just lead to you being outturned by your opponent, especially Spitfire Mark 9s and Spitfire Mark 16s, and being left to dry and die. So, how do we go about exactly using our poor turn circle to decent effect, especially when opponents will come at us head on? Well, we're about to show that against this enemy Typhoon. We have the altitude advantage, don't get me wrong, we have the speed advantage, but we're still going to have to make that Typhoon bleed energy. So we fake a head on, cut underneath, and we begin to climb and turn. And this is really where the Gustav 6 holds its own. We're able to keep turning and turning and turning and climbing and climbing and climbing. Although you're going to see at 300 km an hour, watch how the nose tries to start forcing me to level out. And I'm having to use WEP in order to force myself to keep vertical before swinging round with the nose and the rudder in order to come round on the stalling Typhoon and obliterate them. We made very short work of them with our 30mm cannon, and really even in level dogfighting, that technique can prove itself rather valuable. Simply because while you may not have the best turn circle, if you're able to enter the dogfight with equal or superior speed, you can use your always nearly superior climb rate to beat your opponents by forcing them to stall out first. Indeed, the rudder on the G6 is a prized possession, as you can see in pretty much all the dogfights here. I make the most of my rudder rather than just my ability to turn. So, we now move on to the setup and armament. The setup I'm using is as follows: a 30-minute fuel load, 500 metre gun convergence, with air target ammunition in the 13mm machine guns and Omni-Purpose ammunition for the 30mm cannon. The map we're on is the Airfield Domination map Sicily, and it's not going too bad so far. The reason I have that set up is because the air target ammunition seems to achieve quite a few nice criticals when and where necessary, and really Omni-Purpose ammunition seems to be the best from my experience for the 30mm cannon. I have given stealth ammunition a go, although I've found no sort of upgrade or difference. Additionally, I have tried the 20mm cannon firing through the propeller hub instead of the 30mm, although I'll come on to my success with that shortly. With this enemy Spitfire stalling out, it's a Mark 14. We completely shear their tail off, achieving our ace. As you can see, in the last two situations I've relied on having the altitude advantage in order to force my opponents to stall out. We descend now, and I go on to show how poorly the 109 Gustav 6 acts in the boom and zoom roll at a high speed and in an elongated dive. This P-51, fortunately for us, has tunnel vision, and it costs them incredibly dearly. As I hope you saw there, at 700 km an hour our roll rate almost froze up, and as a result that meant that we struggled to roll onto target, something that say a Focke-Wulf 190 A8, your battle rating contemporary of 5.3, will not have as much trouble doing. Ergo, if you are going to boom and zoom, you will need to do it over short, succinct distances, making sure your speed does not excess about 650 km an hour, because that's when your roll rate suffers horrendously. Ergo, the only time I'd suggest going for a high speed dive and indeed boom and zoom would be of course on enemy bombers. And it's at this point that we come on to why I do not field the 20mm cannon. The reason for this is as follows. The G-6 is a plane that is heavily reliant on its climb rate and energy. As a result, if I'm not going to be turn fighting, I do not expect to have to turn and clasp shots with my 20mm cannon if I mounted it. Instead, I intend to get that one pass with the 30mm in an energy situation where I can rip my opponent to pieces, and if I miss, I can run for it, or I can come round for a pass a couple minutes later. Ergo, I will always at the start of a game, regardless of airfield domination or ground strike, go for the highest possible altitude before I have to engage a target. Because if I can come down on my targets, and indeed B-17s and G-10s will suffer to your strengths, if you can come down on them from an altitude advantage with high speed, you can make that 30mm sing songs all day for you. Of course, getting to high altitudes is complemented by the fact you've got a very powerful engine and a brilliant climb rate. So, you probably ask then, well, why not mount some of the Rüstzeiten, i.e. in particular the 20mm cannons or the 30mm cannons under the wings? I personally feel these compromise my climb rate and indeed any maneuverability I have. Moreover, if you mount the Rüstzeiten, I've noticed that the plane will want to go nose down even more, and sometimes this can really compromise your situation when you're just on the precipice of being able to force yourself into one of those helixes that I performed on that Typhoon, except because of the pods you're being forced to stall out a little bit earlier than you'd normally expect. And again, here I'm going to show exactly why the roll rate locks up so severely as I try and boom and zoom this A6M2. Only a small portion of my output actually hits them, and it's just, I'd say, 1 or 2 30mm shells. But then again, we're able to run exceedingly quickly from our opponents who are trying to catch us, maintaining a speed of 700 km/h for a good portion of our escape, and using WEP to complement that. So, having outlined to you why I do not mount the Rüstzeiten, in particular because they compromise the manoeuvrability that I have, is there anything else to note? Well, if you're going bomber hunting, expect to get hit. That's an obvious statement. However, what's interesting about the G-6 is you have some armour. You have quite a bit around the cockpit as well, which means that you are able to take a few grazing shots, although sometimes you will end up losing your wings. Just because unfortunately, while the wing structure has been strengthened as it did get historically, it's still not as strong as some of your contemporaries. In particular, if I look at, say, a Bearcat or indeed a Focke-Wulf 190A series, their wings seem to come off a little less easily or take a little bit less damage. Still, that's nothing to complain about. We have to expect it. And speaking of great expectations, this is what happens when I aim for the right hand wing of a B-17 flying down low and slow. As you can see, our 30mm is absolutely brilliant. The wing completely coming off with the first couple of cannon shells. And that's really where the Gustav 6 excels, being able to come down hard on opponents, hit them with the hammer of that 30mm cannon, and then just break away or climb back up. And indeed, with 7 kills in the game, and this game in the bag, it's time to break away, pull out the aerobatic smoke, and celebrate. Ergo, with that being said, I think it's time to review some stats. So, upon reflection, how well did we do? Well, our 7 kills netted us just shy of 24,000 silver lines, and just shy of 2,000 research points, all going towards our research on the Messerschmitt 163 Comet. We reflect by noting how well the Gustav 6 performs when it's got energy and also has altitude. We managed to take on opponents that were our equal, although they were not our equal in terms of their altitude and perhaps their speed. We managed to take down a Tempest, which in my book is worth 2 kills, simply because the Tempest is your equal if not your superior in all regards. Of course, the Gustav 6 is a very situation dependent plane, and as you've seen, it plays to my strengths very well. I'm a conservative player, and so I like to have altitude and energy advantage. Ergo, the G6 will do very well in games full of bombers, simply because it's got the armament to rip bombers to pieces, with the 30mm taking off wings and structure parts. Meanwhile, the 13mm, especially the air target or tracer belt in particular, filled with high explosive incendiary rounds, being able to essentially take out gunners when and where appropriate. We complement this game by looking at how well we perform with regards to our team, coming in 4th place and showing that we contributed well to our mission accomplished. So, as a result, if you're a fan of Messerschmitt 109s, especially the G series, then this Gustav is a must-have. Ergo, I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder Fighter arcade reviews on my channel. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies!